Hello, I'm going to be presenting the Smartphone Forensics Framework. This is a command line tool written in Python to perform forensics tasks on mobile devices. The idea behind this framework is to be able to add new functionality in the form of new modules when you have a new set of requirements, as opposed to having to rewrite a tool or writing a tool from scratch when you want to extract new artifacts or have a different set of requirements. Um, if you're familiar with frameworks like the Metasploit framework, ReconNG, PowerShell Empire, the basically command line interface of this framework is going to be familiar to you. Those projects served as inspiration to me for this framework, and I think that it's a great way to provide functionality to other people and also a common set of files and code that can be reused by others that want to add new functionality. It's a good way to collaborate on a project, and basically that's why I decided to structure my project in this way, instead of just implementing a set of scripts to achieve the objectives that I wanted, with the modules that I'm going to describe later. So related to these modules, so with this first release, I'm including 3 iOS modules that perform different forensics tasks on the contacts database and the iMessage and SMS database of the iOS backup. Before getting into the structure of the framework, this is just a list of dependencies or requirements. At a high level, there are 4 third-party modules Python modules that need to be installed before this framework can be used. Otherwise, some of the functionality is not going to work properly. These instructions are also included in the document that I released with the project. This is a high-level overview of the way the code is structured. I'm not going to read all the details, but this gives you an idea of the folders that are part of the project and where to find some of the functionality. So highlighting some of the important stuff, this is the entry point to application. Then, for example, the lib export folder contains common functionality to export output to HTML or PDF. There's some helper functions included in some of the modules here. There's the modules folder that obviously contains the set of files that are where the modules that I'm releasing are implemented. Each module also contains configuration file. Well, one configuration file, and this is a top-level configuration file for all iOS modules. I'm going to get into the configuration files in a little bit. Moving on, this is more related to the modules set of files. So native, meaning these modules use files from the native iOS applications as opposed to third-party apps. I have a placeholder here for future modules that maybe need to extract artifacts from third-party applications like Skype or maybe Facebook or any other third-party application. But the ones that I'm releasing with this framework are contacts and messages. So basically they're native applications, and that's why the code that implements those that functionality and those the settings in the configuration files are included in this folder. Then we have the SFF, or Smartphone Forensics Framework, and basically the core files that we have. The framework.py is basically the top level class of the framework, and functionality that can be accessed from any part of the application would go here. Then the base implements the forensics class, which inherits from this top level class, and it adds support for some of the important commands of the application, like the show command, the use command, and also some of the output that's displayed when you type help. This is also implemented here. So getting into the modules, these are the 3 modules that I'm including with this first release of the framework. The first module well, I'm going to get into the modules in the next few slides, but all three modules inherit from the iOS module class. So with the framework, I'm including a set of common classes that can be extended to provide new functionality on top of iOS. So I added a base module class, which is the base class for any module of the framework. So whether it's iOS or some other platform, you can extend from base module. I also implemented an iOS module class, which inherits from base module, and the purpose behind or the reason behind this iOS module is basically to add common functionality that all iOS modules would need. For example, one easy example here is the iOS module adds the backup directory option, which pretty much any iOS module that requires access to the iOS backup would need to know where that backup is located. So this module already adds that backup directory as a required option, and it validates that the user provides that a value to that option before it can run. So that validation is performed there, and there's other functionality included in that module, but that gives you an idea of how it's structured. So these three modules inherit from iOS module to take advantage of that code. So related to the options, so each module has a set of options that the user can set to basically configure how the module runs or how the output is displayed. So some of the options are to be able to show or hide certain columns from the output. Some of the options are for filtering data from the output. So for example, the contacts list and the extract conversations modules include a keywords option where the user can specify a set of keywords to filter the output to include only rows that contain any of those keywords. So in the context of the conversations, for example, you can if you have specific words that you're interested in, you can type those in as a comma separated list in the keywords option and only get messages that contain those keywords. So I'm gonna get into a little bit more of the detail of each of the modules. So this first module basically lists the contact information from the iOS contacts database or the address book located in the iOS backup. So basically the user can see the list of contacts that are stored in the application, and the user can export the output to HTML or PDF to analyze for later. As I was talking about in the previous slide, so one of the supported options is the keywords option, which you can use to filter the output. And these are some of the other options. I'm not going to read all of them because the description is here and also provided in the document that I'm releasing. Then the next module is the module to extract conversations. So this is probably the module that is more useful from the three, although the other ones are used to get some information needed to provide the input to this. But basically, with this module, you can extract any conversation of an iOS backup in its entirety in a way that's easy to see basically the flow of the conversation. So when the iPhone stores messages, they're stored in a table where basically if you just dump the output of the table, you're gonna see a bunch of messages that are related to, they're part of different conversations mixed, because basically it depends on when each message was received, and they're just ordered by message ID, which is an auto-generated ID that iOS gives to each message. So the purpose of the extract conversations module is to be able to choose the messages that are only part of each conversation and independently, as opposed to just having to figure out which message is part of which conversation. Hopefully in the demo this is going to be a little bit clearer. This module supports things like filtering using keywords. You can also specify a date range with the start date and end date options. This conversation IDs is the list of conversations that you want to extract, and you get those IDs from the actually from the next module that I'm going to talk about, which is the one that lists the conversations that are stored in the database. So basically, each conversation has a unique ID, and that is given by iOS. And then with that ID, you can just give that ID to this module and then extract that conversation. To be flexible, this conversation ID can be a list of conversations, and basically you can extract them all at once if you want to specify the range. You can also specify, for example, here I gave the example that shows that you can specify ranges of IDs. So conversations 1 through 3, then 5, and 7, 8, 9, 10. These other properties, the include ones, basically show or hide certain columns from the output, and then show contact info. This is a useful one too. So by default, the messages do not, as they're stored in the database, do not have the contact information from the address book. So you would see the phone number of the email address of the person that was part of the message, but you wouldn't see the name stored in the address book. So this module correlates that information with the address book to get that. And another cool thing about this module is that it can also, attachments are not necessarily easy to see when you just dump the contents of the database, because references are stored in different places, and you need to figure out what the specific file name of the attachment. In this case, when by attachment I mean, so if you send an image in a message, it would be stored as an attachment on the device, and then you need to find that attachment, that file, and then figure out what that file name is and find it. And this module also does that behind the scenes to be able to show it in the output. An important note here is that for the images to be displayed, you need to select the HTML or PDF output. But when you're just using the application in the console view, then obviously images are not going to render there. Finally, the messages list module shows the list of conversations that are stored in the database, and that's what I was talking about earlier. So basically with this module, you can get the IDs of the conversations, and then with each conversation, you can see who's part of that conversation. So from here, you can see maybe which conversation you're interested in, or the range of conversations if you want to extract them all, and basically use that information to use the other module to extract the actual conversations. So, okay, so with that overview, then now it's time for the demo. Okay, so time for the demo. So to start the framework, basically I just run the entry point file, and this is what it looks like. So if you want to see what options are available, you can just type help at any time and then see what commands are available. So you can see more details, for example, help show, and see what you can do. So here in this case, I want to show what modules are available. Let's do it again here. So you can see, you can use that show command to see the modules. And with the use command, you can basically start using one of the modules. So you can either type the use the module and then module ID, or the module name. I'm going to use the module ID because it's shorter and easier. So here now I'm using the contact/list module. So here I can show what options are available, and here the backup directory is already filled because I added that in the configuration file. Then you can see all the other options that are available here. So once the required options are set, in this case I'm not going to add any keywords to filter or anything. You can just use the run command and then basically get the output here. I'm blurring this output obviously because the backup has personal information, so but you get the idea.